Diego Velázquez. Diego Rodríguez de Silva y Velázquez was a Spanish painter who was a leading artist in the court of King Philip IV. He was an individualistic artist of the contemporary Baroque period. Important as a portrait artist. In addition to numerous renditions of scenes of historical and cultural significance, he painted scores of portraits of the Spanish royal family, other notable European figures, and commoners, culminating in the production of his masterpiece, Las Meninas. From the first quarter of the 19th century, Velázquez's artwork was a model for the realist and impressionist painters, in particular, Édouard Manet. Since that time, more modern artists, including Spain's Pablo Picasso and Salvador Dalí, as well as Anglo-Irish painter Francis Bacon, have paid tribute to Velázquez by recreating several of his most famous works. Born in Seville, Andalusia, Spain, Diego was the first child of João Rodríguez da Silva and Jeromina Velázquez. Was baptized at the Church of St. Peter in Seville on Sunday, June 6, 1959. Velázquez was educated by his parents to fear God and, intended for a learned profession, received good training in languages and philosophy. Influenced by many artists, he showed an early gift for art. Consequently, he began to study under Francisco de Herrera, a vigorous painter who disregarded the Italian influence of the early Seville school. Velázquez remained with him for 1 year. It was probably from Herrera that he learned to use brushes with long bristles. Velázquez went to Madrid in the first half of April 1622 with letters of introduction to Don Juan de Fonseca, himself from Seville, who was chaplain to the king. At the request of Pacheco, Velázquez painted the portrait of the famous poet Luis de Góngora. Velázquez painted Góngora crowned with a laurel wreath, but painted over it at some unknown later date. It is possible that Velázquez stopped in Toledo on his way from Seville, on the advice of Pacheco, or back from Madrid on that of Góngora, a great admirer of El Greco, having composed a poem on the occasion of his death. In December 1622, Rodrigo de Villarrando, the king's favorite court painter, died. Don Juan de Fonseca conveyed to Velázquez the command to come to the court from the Count Duke of Olivares, the powerful minister of Philip IV. He was offered 50 ducats to defray his expenses, and he was accompanied by his father-in-law. Fonseca lodged the young painter in his own home and sat for a portrait himself, which, when completed, was conveyed to the royal palace. A portrait of the king was commissioned. On August 16, 1623, Philip IV sat for Velázquez. Completed in 1 day, the portrait was likely to have been no more than a head sketch, but both the king and Olivares were pleased. Olivares commanded Velázquez to move to Madrid, promising that no other painter would ever paint Philip's portraits, and all other portraits of the king will be withdrawn from circulation. In 1629, he went to live in Italy for a year and a half. Though his first Italian visit is recognized as a crucial chapter in the development of Velázquez's style and in the history of Spanish royal patronage, since Philip IV sponsored his trip, we know rather little about the details and specifics. What the painter saw, whom he met, how he was perceived, and what innovations he hoped to introduce into his painting. In 1660, a peace treaty between France and Spain was consummated by the marriage of Maria Teresa and Louis XIV, and the ceremony took place on the islands of Pheasants, a small swampy island in the Bidasoa. Velázquez was charged with the decoration of the Spanish pavilion and with the entire scenic display. He attracted much attention from nobility of his bearing and the splendor of his costume. On June 26 he returned to Madrid, and on July 31st he was stricken with fever. Feeling his end approaching, he signed his will, appointing as his sole executor his wife and his firm friend named Fuensalida, keeper of the royal records. He died on August 6, 1660. He was buried in the Fuensalida's vault of the church of San Juan Bautista, and within 8 days his wife Juana was buried beside him. Unfortunately, this church was destroyed by the French in 1811, so his place of interment now is unknown. There was much difficulty in adjusting the tangled accounts outstanding between Velázquez and the treasury, and it was not until 1666, after the death of King Philip, that they were finally settled.